Hello, well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Smith MMIE webinar. My name is Peter Gallant. I'm the MMIE Program Director. That's our Masters of Management, Innovation, Entrepreneurship program here in the Smith School of Business at Queen's University. I am delighted to be joined today by Professor Shai Dubey, who's going to be speaking and giving our keynote today on creativity and whether or not it can be learned. And so I'm really looking forward to having Shai unpack that issue with us. This is an interactive webinar. I think he's going to be asking you a question or two as well, which is cool. Also joining me are our Associate Director, Marianne Young. She's the Associate Director of the MMIE program. So if you have questions about the program itself, the structure, the courses, and how the program is delivered in our innovative year-long 3 boot camp format, then please feel free to reach out to Marianne either with questions in the chat or questions at the end of the webinar, or reach her by email as well at marianne.young@queensu.ca. And also joining us is Beth McCallum. Beth is probably the first and very friendly face you would see if you choose to apply to the MMIE program at Queen's University at the Smith School of Business. So Beth would be assisting you with not only program information, but also preparing your application to make it the most competitive application you can have to successfully apply to and be enrolled in our program. So looking forward to the possibility of having you join us. If you're interested in entrepreneurship, if you're interested in innovation, it's a great opportunity to take a program that can really honestly change the trajectory of your future if you are interested in those specific topics. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce Professor Shai Dubey. Shai has joined Queen's since 2006. He's an assistant professor here in the Smith School of Business and the Distinguished Faculty Fellow of Business Law. I've known Shai for many years. Incredible background, incredible versatility, a master of many subjects. He teaches courses in negotiation, cross-cultural management, ethics, domestic, international business law, and entrepreneurship. He's the academic director for a number of our project courses across the MBA and international business programs that are offered here. I think he's directed 5 or 6 of our professional and graduate programs over the years. He's also been practicing a commercial lawyer with lots of experience in commercial law and entrepreneurship and business and mergers and acquisitions. And way back at the beginning of his career, he was even a commercial pilot and flight instructor. So how cool is that? In the Masters of Management, Innovation, Entrepreneurship program, Shai is responsible for teaching our MMIE 883 course, which is Innovation in Practice, as well as delivering workshops on negotiation. And remember, it's not what we get in life, it's what we negotiate. So I think those are very valuable parts of our MMIE program. And again, he's joined along with Marianne and Beth. So we hope you enjoy today's webinar. Shai, the opening for this webinar was creativity, can it be learned? Creativity is at the core of innovation, but can you learn to be creative, or is it an inherent trait? So with that question, I will turn it over to you to explore
Thanks,
some
Peter.
of the answers. Thank you, Shai.
All right. Well, while we have people, we maybe just put that poll up and see what people's views are. Elizabeth, can you just put the poll up right at the beginning? We're just going to start with a poll and see what happens here. If you can take a second and vote, can it be learned? And I'm curious. And Elizabeth, let me know when you've got responses, because you can probably see them coming in. And as we're waiting, there's not a lot. There's only about 6 or 7 people. So I'd be just curious on what we see here. Do you have, Elizabeth, do you have any responses to post the results? Oh, we got 100% saying yes. Well, then we don't need to be here. We can just all leave. No, I'm just kidding. Let me just pull up some slides here, and then we're going to talk about things. So here we go. Give me 1 second. So welcome, and it's nice to have everybody here. And Marianne, can you see my slides? Excellent. Thank you very much. Right. So as Peter said, I am teaching the MMIE 883, the Innovation in Practice course. And this year was the first time I've taught it in a long time. And in this course, one of the things that we took a look at was around creativity. And that was really where the focus was. And so when we start off, this is a program on innovation and entrepreneurship. And interestingly, there is an intersection between the two. Not all entrepreneurs are necessarily innovators, and not all innovators are necessarily entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship is a very broad category. It includes things like those that get into franchises, etc. They're entrepreneurs, but they may not be innovating because they are following along with a process that's in place. And then you have innovators who will, as you see the intersection there, will become entrepreneurs. And what they will do is they will do disruptive innovation. They may do things that change the way the market goes. Other innovators will be working within the corporate world, in the not-for-profit world, and they will make changes as well too. And so there is a distinction between the two. And it's really interesting to understand that. But let's talk about creativity and innovation, first of all. Let's take away the entrepreneurship. And so what creativity is, it's in my view anyway, is about new ideas. It's about seeing things differently. It's about seeing problems, or even better, seeing opportunities, and how can we change things. And innovation is taking those new ideas and implementing them. But to be able to innovate, first we have to come up with the idea. So if you really think about it, creativity is sort of the foundation of both entrepreneurship and innovation. And so without ideas, we cannot actually implement. So let's spend some time talking around the whole notion of creativity and innovation. So we've already had 4 people say, yep, we can be creative. So interestingly, when it comes to the ability to generate ideas, it's not just a function of the mind, but it is really a function of behavioral skills. So what does that mean? You do have to have the mindset that says, yes, I want to do things differently, but it's also practice that brings out sort of the creativity. So research has been done where a set of identical twins were separated at birth, and then they were brought together through exercises, not just one, many of them were done. And out of this, what was interesting, what the researchers found, that 1/3 of creativity comes from genetics. That's the nature argument. And 2/3 comes from habit. That's the nurture. And so even if you're sitting there going, well, I'm not terribly creative, take heart, because you can learn to be creative. And we'll talk a little bit about where we go from this as well. And you can see the quote from Aristotle. And so a lot of people come into this program saying, well, I don't know how I'm going to be creative, how I can do stuff. And the idea behind this course especially is to push you outside of the boundaries of your comfort zone and to take a look at the things that help you to become more creative. I'm going to have to apologize right now. I'm coming off a bad flu, and so my voice is a little bit raspy, and I may have to stop every once in a while just to grab a drink. What we do in this course is we use a book called The Innovator's DNA, and also we use a test that has been developed out of the Innovator's DNA. And many of you, if you're in the innovation space, will know Clayton Christensen. Unfortunately, Dr. Christensen passed away several years ago, but his colleagues have continued on with the work that he has done. And he has gone from disruptive innovation to looking at what is it that makes people innovative and creative, and what can we do to help. And there's 2 things that come out of the assessment that gets done. Is it tells you where you fall on a spectrum of innovation and creativity compared to others. And it allows you also then to dissect the results based upon a whole bunch of different things. And so, for example, we can look at it by age, by profession, by gender, by country. And so you can compare yourself on various different parameters to find out where you fit. And so is it stagnant when you take this test? No. What we do in the course is that we take the test at the beginning, and then we take the test again at the end after people have had an opportunity to figure out what their plans are going to be to improve their creativity or the areas that they want to improve in, and see what the results are. And they also get a chance to put this in practice, because each of the teams actually has to do an innovation project with a live entity. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. And so the innovator's DNA model is broken down into sort of three buckets. The courage to innovate. So let's talk about that. The challenging of the status quo and the taking of risks. And so we start with how do we start challenging the status quo? And for many people, depending on what profession you're from, where you work, what your culture is, and the culture could be profession, could be company, could be a lot of different things, could also be age as well too. And so culture is very broadly defined. And so in lots of places, I come out of the military, challenging the status quo is not something that is looked highly upon. In fact, it is frowned upon, because the military needs to work in a very narrow way. When instructions are given, people need to follow them. And so that is probably the most difficult thing for people to do. And if you come from certain countries where you're told that the folks that are older than you, that are more senior than you, need to follow them, then challenging the status quo is very difficult. And it's also a very difficult thing for people to do, because it goes against what's inside of you, because it feels unnatural. And so learning how to challenge the status quo is really important, and not to see it as a threat, but to see it as a learning opportunity. And that's what we spend time on. How do you ask these questions in such a way as they're not seen as a threat? And how do you realize yourself that when you ask those questions, you're not attacking somebody who may be more senior than you? Risk-taking, again, we all have a different risk tolerance. I have two children. My kids are age almost 9 and 11. And so it's interesting, the two of them are very different from a risk-taking perspective. So there is a bit of a nature issue that comes up, and there's also a bit of a learned. My oldest is very much a risk taker, and I think that's because I spent a lot of time with her, and then I was traveling a fair amount. And my youngest, he's still a risk taker, but not quite as much. And so the question is, how do we learn how to take risks and not put ourselves into jeopardy? Because entrepreneurship, innovation is actually about taking risk, but it's calculated risk. So it's about how do we put frameworks around the risk taking to help you to be more comfortable. So there's your courage to innovate piece. Then there are the behavior skills. So if you take a look, what happens is the challenging the status quo comes about through certain skills. So the questioning that I talked about earlier, how do we ask the right questions? It's probably one of the most important things. And questioning is about listening, not about telling people what happens. And how do we do this in a way that we can continue to build to understand? Because one of the things about creativity moving into innovation is the idea needs to make sense. Just because you have an idea, if nobody wants to buy it, there's no point in pushing forward. And so this course ties into how do we do market research? How do we find those people that are going to help us as well? The next skill is about observing. We go through life, and I find it fascinating walking around the campus or walking in Toronto or anywhere that I go to. Most people are glued to their screens. There's my phone, and they're walking around looking at this, and life goes on around them without them actually understanding what is happening around them. And interestingly, We see whatever we do in a very narrow frame, and we see that, the innovation has to happen here. But what if somebody else in another area of the world that you deal with does something differently? Can that not be brought forward into your own area from a creativity standpoint? Just because it's not in the space that you're in doesn't mean that it's not applicable. And what observing does is that people start to see things around them. They start to see the connections. They start to, again, tying back to questioning, well, why do they do it that way? And so what we start to see is people pulling on different strings to bring them back into the space that you're trying to be more creative in. And finally, networking. We all understand the whole concept of networking. We go meet people, but interestingly, networking as a creativity skill is slightly different. It's actually going outside your comfort zone. It is talking to people you would never talk to before to find out what they do. You may be surprised about the input and the insights that these people provide you with when it comes to the problem you're trying to solve. And it actually is a conscious effort to go and reach out to those that you would never reach out to. And so part of the test is, or my exercise is, where do you need to improve and how are you going to do it, to have a plan to do it and put it into practice. And finally, when it comes to risk taking, we sit and we wonder in our heads, will it work? Well, what about experimenting, doing small experiments with things so that it can fail or it can succeed, to see, oh yeah, it moves forward. So again, I'll use my children as an example. I can't ride a bike. Well, you hold on to them without the training wheels, and and they can see that, okay, I can balance. There's experimenting. Then you let them go for a few seconds and they roll down the road. And I can still remember my son, you can't let me go, Dad. You can't let go of me. And all of a sudden he was balanced. He was going, I let go of him. And he kind of looked back and went, oh my God, I'm riding on my bike. And so, but it took 2 days of small experiments and showing him how to balance before he was able to do that. And it's the same thing when it comes to creativity. It's the same thing when it comes to innovation as well. And then how do we take all of this stuff that we've learned and we start to bring it together? So this is called associational thinking. We now have observed things, we've experimented with things, we've asked questions. How do we bring it all together? And so many of you probably have Apple products, and maybe some of you are too old to remember the first Apple Touch, the iPod, sorry. They were square little MP3 devices that had a round circle in it. And as you move the circle, it click, 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 click. Well, the associational thinking on that one was Steve Jobs, wanted an MP3 player that could hold a lot of music, but he wanted something that was familiar. And he brought together a padlock and, the combination locks with the iPod. And that's why you have that clicking sound, because it was something natural. Most of us, when we went to school, we had lockers, we had those combination locks. So he was associating. Similarly, if you have an iPhone, why does it have the silver outline? Well, one day, Steve Jobs was walking into the office. He saw a Mercedes-Benz. He saw the front grille, and that's how he brought stuff together. And the people that are really good at bringing different things together to identify new products or services are using those skills to be able to come together. And that's what leads to the innovative business ideas as we go forward. So what we do is, this is what the team assessment canvas. So every student does their separate assessment as to where they are from on the delivery skills chart, the discovery skills chart, and then where you fit on the profile overlay, which has got hundreds of thousands, if not close to 1 million people that have taken this assessment. So it gives you a very good indication of where you are relative to other people. There's no wrong or there's no right answer to this. It just tells you where you are, and it tells you what skills you have. And what it helps to do when you can see this for yourself is you start to understand who you are, really. And so this is a plot of myself. I'm in the blue, and Sam is actually an MMIE graduate, and he was my TA. And what you see here as we work together in developing this course, developing the assignment, what I can see is I am a innovator on the I, and he's more on the delivery side than I am. And you can see where our discovery skills are and what his strengths and my strengths are, relatively speaking. And so, what helps us to do, if you look down at the bottom, I'm not very high on the delivery side where he is. He's very much a delivery person. So we would brainstorm together and how are we going to do this course, do this assessment and things like that. And then I had to step back because I also have ADHD. So I have a very tough time with staying focused for long periods of time, where he's very self-disciplined, very detail-oriented, as opposed to me, which I'm not. And so together as a team, we were able to create a brand new course with bouncing ideas and then being able to execute. And so in that team assignment that I was talking about, what happens is the teams look at what their relative strengths are and how do we utilize those strengths and how do we help our teammates to improve on those skills that they want to improve on. And so the students, and excuse me, sorry about that. The students in this year's class, what they did was, one of the teams was helping out a community center in Toronto. And they found that the problem that the community center thought they had was really not the problem. And they've helped that community center to increase its programming, increase youth attending, getting more funding, getting more safety around the place because it wasn't in a great spot in Toronto. Another team looked at a university out in New Brunswick that was looking to increase the artisans, and they helped that university find different ways to engage more artisans and also the community. Another team, one of the members with Softball Canada was having a tough time getting cities to bid for the annual tournament. And so they understood they dug down, understood the problem, came up with some creative ideas to not only help Softball Canada, but help the cities that might benefit from being able to bring, these tournaments to their cities. So those are 3 of about 11 different ideas. So there was another one, was a major resort was looking to become more green, and the team helped them to partner up, figure out how to become more green, but also how to use that greening that they were doing to grow their customer base and to help the expansion of this resort that was going to occur. So these are the type of projects, and they did this, by the way, in 6 weeks, not 6 months, not 6 years. They started with ideas. They hit roadblocks. They used their strengths. They became creative. They identified the problem. They questioned. They went out and looked at association. They experimented. And at the end of 6 weeks, they had buy-in. All 11 teams had buy-in. And for those of you that are coming to Queens, I did this project in another course. You will find that when you come to Queens and you go to buy a coffee or buy food at one of the premises on campus, you can use your credit card. Queens was the only university in Canada that did not accept credit cards. And the international students in one of my programs have a tough time in 3 months that they cannot get a bank account. And so they, through identifying the problem, finding the right people, using their questioning skills, convinced Queens to accept credit cards. And they also did that in about a 3 or 4 week period in that course. So this is the learning of the creativity. It's learning that we put constraints upon ourselves. And part of understanding creativity is to remove these constraints that we place upon ourselves. I do an exercise in negotiation where I ask people to connect 9 dots using 4 straight lines and not removing the pencil from the paper. And most people that haven't done it in the past can't do it, because as we get older, We impose rules upon ourselves and say we can't do things. This is called living within the box. And what creativity is breaking through that box and looking at things from a different way and not being afraid to go out there. So that is where creativity comes from. Now, innovation cultures are also important. So you'll notice on this graph that there's two things. There's psychological safety and intellectual honesty. So when you are working within a team, within an organization, the higher the intellectual honesty, the higher the psychological safety, the better the innovation culture, the more people can be creative. When there is little intellectual honesty, when you brainstorm and people say, well, that's a dumb idea. So the use of the word but is really problematic, because as soon as you say but to somebody, you stop creativity in its tracks. You stop innovation in its tracks. The better way to do it is great idea and then build on that idea as you move forward. And people then start to have more things coming onto the table. And so what's really important is when you are in a team environment, are you being honest with each other? Can you put ideas up there and be able to come at those ideas in a way that is attacking the idea, not the person? Do you have safety within the team to say it's okay to have a good idea or a bad idea? So what's interesting is that in organizations, we reward success. And so what we get into is people do not want to be creative, because if their idea fails, they won't get rewarded. And what might be interesting is if we started to reward failure, because what that means is we start to take more chances. But we live in a world that everything needs to be perfect. The reality is the world is not perfect. And so these are two things to be, wary of. And even when you go back to your own organizations, can you speak freely? Do people actually listen? Do you have that psychological safety? And do you have that intellectual honesty? Well, that's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought about that. Can we work on that? Sorry, I'm about to lose my voice, I have a feeling here. The other thing that comes out of creativity and innovation is that creativity and innovation, we need to have home runs. We need to be the next Meta, the next Google, the next Apple. The reality is those are once in a lifetime things that occur. Might you be one of those people? Yes, you might be. But we can make so much impact on the world if we understand that innovation and creativity, sometimes the small changes have major impacts in what we do, both from a social standpoint and from a business standpoint. And so absolutely, there is the disruptive, there's the radical side of things, but that doesn't happen all that often. But there's the sustaining. How do we, as market forces come into play, how do we come up with new ideas, be creative to make sure that we don't become irrelevant? Same thing with how do we make incremental changes? How do we come up with ideas? And those incremental changes added together can end up being disruptive. And so the creativity piece is about, oh, well, that's not going to work, so I'm going to stop. Those little ideas are great, and that's why it's important to understand where the matrix comes in. And with that, what I'm going to do is, since there's a bunch of you on here, I'm going to stop to see if people have any questions, comments. Let me see if I can stop my sharing here. Here we go. Because I can't see people. So here's what you can do for me, is if you can raise your hand if you have questions. Happy to address them if you want to go down a different path. Unfortunately, I talk more, but I'm about to lose my voice here. Don't be shy to come off. Remember, intellectual honesty, psychological safety, you have it here. You can put it into the chat function. You can put it into, you can raise your hand. You can put it in the Q&A. Wow. And the forum is open for any discussion. Don't be afraid to come off. I'm not going to bite. Promise me that. I promise you that. Sorry. Marianne, do you have any questions since you're sitting here looking at me?
Yeah, I guess I would just say like, yeah, how does kind of what you spoke to kind of speak to, you know, what you teach within the program and sort of how students would sort of engage with you within the course?
Well, you give me a part of the course that I actually do teach. Oh, here we go. How do students engage? Well, the idea is that I'm there. Um, I usually teach in the first session that they're on campus, and then we have fireside chat. So any question is open. The only bad question, or dumb question, is the one that people don't ask. And so it's about getting more comfortable asking questions. And I think more importantly is understanding, yes, I'm a faculty member, but I'm also a practitioner and I want to help people succeed. And so when they're comfortable dealing with me and realizing they can have any conversation with me, that helps hopefully into the future. Roy, how long does the project take? The one we do in the course starts second last week of August, Marianne, roughly.
Yeah, kind of
And we're
starts
done
kind
at
of,
the end of September. It's only 6 weeks long. It's amazing what people can do. People think that they cannot be creative. People think they cannot make a change. People are shocked by what they can do. They put their minds to it. Do you think AI will take away our creativity if we use it too much? I don't, Sabit, I don't think so. I think one of the things about AI is AI depends upon data. And so what AI does is it takes data and uses that to come up with solutions. So what if something has not been invented yet? What if an idea hasn't been connected yet? And so AI can't do that connection piece that we talked about. So, what if you go into a restaurant and you see the way that a server gives you great service? What is it about that person and how they made you comfortable? Can you take that and move that into something else, into retail? And so can AI do that? Maybe one day it might be able to do that as it starts to teach itself. But right now, unless you can ask the right questions, it can't observe. All it can do is to say, okay, I have this data and I have this data. And what I've seen a lot of with AI is if you ask the same question slightly differently, you get different results. And so McKinsey did an interesting study about what professions are going to be in jeopardy, and entrepreneurship is not one of those. Innovation is not one of those, because it requires that cognitive ability that we have as human beings to make the associational thinking. If what you're doing is the changes that are going down a narrow path, yes, AI can do that. So does that answer your question? You can come off mute if you want. They have the ability to come off mute. Is that right, Marianne?
yes,
Okay,
so
because I can't see anybody else. So
I believe they can just raise their hand, and
okay,
then Elizabeth can take them off mute. Yeah.
okay.
So, um,
Oh, here we go.
yeah. Oh, there's another question. Go for it.
So Rui, the project is not chosen by me. The project is chosen by the team. And so what every team did, I asked them to come up with 2 or 3 project ideas. So the idea here was that somebody in the team had to have some connection with the organization that they wanted to do the project with. And then the team had to decide where to go from that perspective. So I didn't choose it. I would tell people probably that's outside of scope because you don't have enough time. And so I hope that helps you. Did anybody do anything related to healthcare this year? I don't think so, but in other areas that I've done this project, they have. Yes. Can I raise my hand?
Yeah,
Okay, Seven.
if you can raise your hand, then our tech can take you off of mute.
He's having a tough time. Sorry, Sabbath is having a tough time. I didn't know it was a he or she.
Yep, just at the bottom of the screen where all of the options are, it should say raise hand. Just let us know if not.
So Rui, the purpose of there we go, Sabbath. I can see you now. You can come off. Go ahead. You had a question?
Professor, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Sorry. Okay. So yeah, you kind of mentioned already about that, but what I was thinking was, if you're asking the AI, especially like with generative AI tools.
Mhm.
So if you're asking like very well descriptive questions
Questions.
for the AI,
Yep.
so I was trying to play around with some like ChatGPT.
Mhm.
Can you be like creative and gave me some ideas to build some companies like Airbnb, some business ideas like to build Airbnb, and it was giving me different items, so different ideas from different angles. So I was thinking, if this kind of intelligence is coming, like in few years, how will we be creating ideas? Because AI has already like went so much, and I was just wondering, is this thing going to take our intelligence? It's coming up ideas, especially with business.
I don't, you know what? I don't think the generative AI is at that point that it's going to take away. Might it happen in the future? Possible. Sam Altman was saying that it's, it's a very dangerous thing. We're not there yet. That's for sure. And, those ideas that it generates, the thing also is that it's just because it's generating ideas doesn't mean an idea will come into fruition. And so Steve Jobs is actually quoted as saying, for every idea that we bring into production, there are many that we don't follow. And why didn't we follow them? And so that's part of the innovation process. The creativity process is getting the ideas. The innovation process is actually taking those ideas and saying, does somebody actually want what we're trying to build? And that's where the human beings come in, because you have an idea. Now you've got to go to the market and say, do people actually want this?
Yeah, makes sense.
Right? You see the difference?
Yeah, I see the difference. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll come up with lots of ideas, which is fabulous, because now you have more to work with. And what it does is think of generative AI more as a brainstorming tool.
Exactly. Yeah.
But now that you got all these ideas, so what? Like, one of the biggest problems that I find that people have is, because I have a problem, other people must have that problem. And you have to validate that. So people go down this path, and this is where the teams ran into issues, where in the project is they came up with ideas and they had an echo chamber that they were talking to themselves. And when they went to talk to the clients, they found out the clients didn't have the same problem or didn't see it the same way. And so a lot of the teams had to do some pivots to find out how to help the client.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. It really makes sense. But it's just that sometimes when I get some kind of doubts, I just usually like, especially lately, I just put it like on ChatGPT and it just gives me lots of different answers. And I feel like in just like few years, I won't be using my mind. Like, I'm just gonna ask everything. So that's why I was curious.
Well, I think you're right to a certain point. What generative AI is going to do is to take away the mundane tasks. As a lawyer, for example, doing due diligence, that's what generative AI will do. But it isn't going to help me when I look at this piece of regulation or law that says I can't do this. ChatGPT isn't going to help me to find out what I can do. That's what my mind is for. So I can now, instead of spending 50% of my time doing mundane stuff, I can spend 2% of my time doing mundane stuff and the rest of the time thinking. One of the biggest challenges for people is that we get so busy day to day doing the same stuff that we actually don't take the time to self-reflect and find out what goes on. And to be successful, as in a creativity standpoint, you have to, and even as a manager, you have to have 20% of your time to thinking. Right? ChatGPT just helps you frame around the edges so that you can then expand that thinking. So I don't think your brain is going to go away. So don't worry about that. I think your brain is still going to be needed.
All right.
Let me see what Bijan says. Based on your slides, I think innovation in environments that they are not support is not simple. So Bijan, I agree with the first part of your statement. Innovation in environments that they are not and support new ideas is not simple. I agree. And that one of the problems is that then people leave if they, some people thrive in that environment. Those that are very creative and innovative will leave to find other things. But do you think the results of innovation in the society has more chance to be successful or not? I think it has chance to be successful. I think we have to find where we are, we have that safety that I talked about, where we are respected for who we are, not just another number being told what to do. And I think one of the things is that if you are an innovator, if you are creative, sometimes it's finding that right place for you to work is the most important thing, and where your ideas can flourish. And so and again, it depends where you are located. Sometimes it's more difficult in certain countries than in other countries. And so one of the challenges, for example, that international students have coming to Canada in the academic space is we don't rote learn. We don't tell people 1 + 1 = 2. Now tell me what 1 + 1. What we try to do is to get people to be more critical thinkers. And that is, again, developing that creativity. And so if you've been taught to learn a certain way and now you're being taught to learn a different way, it's tough to do. And so people are innovating all the time. If they weren't innovating and they weren't creative, what I tell people is we would still be living in caves. We would still be starting our fires with a flint, 2 pieces of flint. And so innovation happens all the time. And sometimes we don't even see it. It becomes part of the fabric of who we are. And does society get better? Yeah, I think it does overall. I'm an optimist. Bijan, does that answer your question? All right. Marianne, do you want to take it over here? Because it looks like...
Yeah, we'll just, if there's no other questions or if anybody wanted to say anything, please raise your hand. Also open to the table if you did have any specific program related questions. Beth and I are also able to sort of answer any questions there, or you can certainly reach out to us and we can talk to you about program applications. But yeah, with that in mind, if nobody has any further questions, we will leave you to the rest of your day. We will follow up via email with a copy of this recording. I do want to take the opportunity to thank Shai for his time. And look at that. I just popped up a question. So let's get into those questions.
All right. I'd like to know, how can you evaluate new ideas from the feasibility perspective? So Bijan, that's an interesting one. Feasibility could be through testing. So feasibility could mean a lot of things. And it also means, what are the ideas? Is it a new product, new service? So there's lots of different ways to do it. Sometimes you do it through market research. You find people that might use your product or service, you do market segmentation, do surveys, do interviews to see what happens. Sometimes you have to build a prototype. As well. There's lots of different ways. And part of this program is actually developing those skills. I give the foundations around creativity and starting the innovation, and other faculty are coming in and saying, okay, you have an idea. How do we actually take it to fruition? How do we test it? And that's where the program actually works. So think of me as the bottom building block, and then you're going to build all the way up with different skills. I'm a real estate broker from 3 years looking to start my own brokerage. Would this program be good for me? Marianne, do you want to see if you can answer that question?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it depends on what you're looking to do, right? There's a lot of diverse range of, outcomes for this program. One is sort of building up a business and growing a business, or starting a business, or even kind of, innovative projects within corporate environments. So it certainly could be an opportunity for you to sort of grow what it is that you're building, and sort of test that and play around with that. And, maybe you've had some challenges in that space. Then this program would sort of give you the tools and kind of equip you with how to work through that. So yeah, absolutely, it could potentially be a good fit for you. And reaching out to Beth to kind of talk through your qualifications and really get a sense of what your outcomes are, or what you'd be looking for, would be where I would suggest starting.
So
It looks like Beth is just kind of going to be writing her email address as a response to your question there.
So maybe I can't, real estate, again, there's different ways of doing things. So if it's just a standard brokerage, that's one thing. But I was just thinking about a student from several years ago who was in a business. It wasn't not similar to the brokerage business, but what they did was, and I remember having lots of discussions with them, is they found a different way to grow the business. And she started off by herself. And now this individual has, I'm not sure how many employees, but lots of employees, and the business has just grown like crazy. But she found a different way to run the business, something that hadn't been done before, and a different way to attract clients. So the real estate business has been fairly, I won't say stagnant. There are people that are innovating around the edges, but there's lots of innovation because everybody's doing the same thing. And so if you're going to be doing something different and going after a different market, yes, it could be helpful. So I had to think about that one. All right.
Any other questions floating in? Okay.
Well, I'm hoping that, that I will have an opportunity to actually see some of you, since I actually can't see you. And when you get on campus I guess it'll be next August now.
Yeah.
2023 is almost over.
Hard to believe, hard to believe. Well, thank you, Shai, for joining the session today and giving a little bit of insight into what a class in MMIE could look like. As we mentioned, please reach out to Beth if you've not already done so. And she's happy to answer any questions that you might have as it relates to the application process for this program. So thank you again, and hope to see you all in 2024.
Have a great holiday that's coming up.
Thanks,
Happy
Shai.
holidays to you, everybody.
Thanks, Shai.